Hey, welcome to the greneIT podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates, for the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, greneIT. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, and maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Robin, welcome to the greneIT podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, Rona. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. I'm very good. We've had quite a lot of rain here in the UK, so it's been typical school holidays. I know you've got a family with kids at home as well, so yeah, I'm really well. Thank you for asking, Robin. And for the listeners, I'm delighted to welcome Robin Edwards onto this sponsored episode, actually, via Robin's business, greneIT, or do you say greneIT? How do you say it?
I say greneIT.
greneIT.
Yeah, it sounds green. It's the old English green.
I noticed that interesting spelling. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Robin grew up in the beautiful scenic Himalayan mountains and the foothills, and so essentially the environment and nature was all around you, wasn't it? So it kind of became part of your DNA. So you always learned from a very young age and was influenced by the power of it and the need to protect it, etc. And I guess fast forward a few years, we won't give away anyone's age, but fast forward a few years, after 10, 20 odd years working in systems, IT, technology, you wanted to essentially combine both that knowledge, but also how we can educate everyday users of tech. And in 2017, you established greneIT, blending both of those values of nature, protection, and technology and IT. So I would love to dive into this. And I think what we really wanted to focus on, Robin, was just some of that real general knowledge to help the listeners understand when we say IT and green or environmentally friendly, most people would go, well, that just doesn't make sense. Or what is the energy use of an average laptop? So over to you, Robin. Please treat this as I'm a complete idiot and I know nothing in this space. Help me understand the knowledge that you want to share.
Thanks, Rona. So it's quite an interesting topic because I've come across a lot of individuals, and while talking to them, they say, oh yeah, websites, they're clean, they don't have emissions or they don't emit smoke, like if you take it in that analogy. But when you put everything together and you're working with technology, behind everything there's a computer or there's a server. And all these devices take up energy. So that's what we are talking about here. So your website is running on a server, the server is run on a data center, and the data center uses lots and lots of energy. So the source of the energy can be fossil fuel, it can be mixed energy, or it can be renewable. So depending on what type of energy it is, it can have emissions, it can be clean. So in simple terms, it's just that everything, even when you use your TikTok, Instagram, anything, it's running on a server, it's taking energy. It's running on your phone, it's taking energy. It's traveling from the server to your phone or your laptop via data network, it's taking energy. So whatever area is taking energy, there are emissions. So in this case, there are three: the server, the data network where it's traveling through, and your laptop or like a tablet or a mobile phone or whatever. Yeah. So essentially, like these are the three segments we break it into, and that's where the energy is used up. but most of the times we don't know what type of energy is that. In my field, because I worked in IT, we have our own data centers, not our own data centers, but managed by a third party.
Yeah.
So we make sure that they run on completely 100% renewable energy. We like don't use data center where they can use energy which is from fossil fuel, and then we'll offset it by planting trees, which is everybody knows is not enough.
Yeah.
So the first thing is to stop the pollution wherever you can, stop it. And so that's what we do at the data centers. And then as the websites or whatever travels from our data center, we track it where it's going.
Right.
And then we have some calculations and do it, and then we assess how much emission it's got. So it's three
And so,
segments yeah.
yeah, so I think what you're describing there is very much for the benefit of business, right? So that's the businesses knowing the supply chain of their data centers, energy usage, and tying that up then to right.
But same stands for every individual. Like we can't uh, we we can't know like what we are using, where it's coming from. So for individual, like it's just that we need to be aware what we are using. So for example, if you have a website or a personal website or something,
Yeah.
make sure it's running on a service which has good renewable energy.
So help us understand then. So let's say, for example, let's take an average business, a single entrepreneur, and they've got two websites, they've got a laptop, they've got a mobile phone. When they go and, I don't know, go on WordPress or GoDaddy, things like that, how do you know? Is there equivalent of like I can do a search on green banks and search who invests the most in fossil fuels, tobacco, all of those sorts of things, and who's the greenest bank?
Yeah.
Is there the equivalent for domains, websites, data centers?
There is not any equivalent of it, but there is a website which I often use. It's called website carbon.com. If you go there and if you have your website, you can put it on that, and then it will tell you whether it's hosted on a green server or not. And it will tell you how much emission it is taking, like how much energy it's taking. So it's called website.
Can I just repeat the name of that? It was websitecarbon.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So it depends on how you build the website. So if somebody is building the website, the smaller the website, the lighter the website it is, the less energy it takes. It's same as the analogy of a car. Like if you have a sports car with a big engine, it takes a lot of fuel. If you've got a small car, and then it takes less fuel. So the same principle applies to all the websites. If you have a very small website it's not, the website can be small, but the thing is that how much graphics it's using, what's the size of the graphics, and whether it's optimized or not. So it's like the smaller the footprint of a website, the less energy it takes.
So essentially, there's not really a tool out there yet where you've got like you just touched on it there, like a calculator per se, where you can actually make, because when you think about big companies, essentially they're going to have videos and images and links and blogs and you name it, that just stacks up.
That's
but
what happened.
How can we make this comparable to that person who's maybe got a website, not thought of looking? On average, what would a very small website be compared to in terms of emissions?
So the standards which are set, like which we do as web developers, is a page should be between 500 KB to 1 MB size. That's the standard. And right now the average is hitting to about 9 MB.
Right.
So we are way beyond the target mark, what it should be. And that's what takes the emission. So when we transfer 9 MB of data across, obviously the server has to process it. Then there's the emission, and that 9 MB of data needs to travel down the data networks and down onto your laptop or whatever device. So that's all taking energy. So it's like if you have 1 MB, And if you compare it to 9 MB, that means that your website is taking energy equivalent to nine websites.
Wow. And so what what is that equivalent to? So if I'm on average, my website is 9 MB, what's that equivalent to in terms of, I don't know, car emissions or tons, or what, is it, do you have a simple metric we can compare it to?
Yeah, so it's usually like so I did a calculation of how much emissions greneIT has saved just by hosting websites on a server. So we have about 30 odd websites, and for the 30 odd websites, if they were on a regular server, they would have emitted 127 kg of CO2 every month.
Yeah.
So that's what it's like. If you can just give me a minute, I now can give you some.
Yeah, that'd be great. So essentially then, if you are moving those websites into a server that uses 100% renewable,
Yeah, yeah,
you're then saving those
yeah,
carbon emissions. But
yeah.
how do you ensure, in terms of like, how do you make sure that your servers and data centers really are using renewables? And because
Yeah.
it's difficult
It is.
sometimes,
It is very difficult.
know.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
how do
Uh,
you do that due
yeah.
diligence?
So I'll just get back to that figure which I was going to tell you, which was about our website. Uh, if it's hosted on a traditional server, it'll take about 4.2 kgs per month of
Yeah.
CO2, and
Okay.
with us that becomes zero
Yes.
because it's running on. So coming back to your question, how do we assess that a data center is running on renewable energy? So I looked, this was my biggest obstacle running my business because I could not find any proper one which had the credentials and which were totally 100%. There's one data center called, it's a German company. I don't know if any of you know, it's called Hetzner.
Right. No, I don't.
It's so they have data centers in Germany and Finland. So
Yeah.
out of those two data centers, we use the Finland one because Finland uses 100% renewable energy, and they
Right.
have certificates from the energy provider what energy mix they're using, and it's wind and hydro that, that we use.
Okay.
So
So
we have
that's
yeah, like I asked for the certification and they provided for the certification. So that's what the certification is for that data center energy use. But then it's not only the energy which is being used, but also like how much heat is being emitted from the data center and how the heat is being used and how they're cooling it. So there's a technology where they can use like in Finland there are lots of lakes, so you can use the heat from the servers into the lake and then cycle the water, so it's naturally cooled, so it's not
okay.
emitting.
So let's just go back a little bit. So
Yeah,
obviously, lots of websites going into a data center, and that data center essentially creates a lot of heat. And I have
yeah,
heard that they base a lot of data centers in cold countries,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
naturally,
sure.
for that reason. Again,
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
So with this heat, what you're saying is what's important is what we do with that heat rather than waste the heat.
yeah.
You're saying in Finland it goes into the water and heats water for offices for use?
Yeah, sometimes they do that, but it's like they use a natural process for cooling. So rather than letting the heat emit and create more emissions,
Right.
we take the water which is already cooled and then we use it to cool the systems. So it's called natural cooling.
Okay. And so what would, in comparison, a data center that isn't doing it that, what's the impact of a data center creating loads of heat and just letting that heat go? Is that
So
just seen as inefficient and wasteful, or?
it adds up to the global warming. So the heat is
Yeah.
adding up to all the gases and everything, and just its negative impact on our environment. So that's what happens.
Do you find that in your industry, I mean, essentially, I'd be sitting here going, well, you know, how does NASA deal with their energy data centers? How does the military and the government and all of this? Are these guys playing ball, or are they just using mass data centers that have tons of
Yeah,
emissions pumping out?
I've had the thought and I looked around, and there's quite a lot of data centers, and the majority are run by Microsoft, Google, and Amazon.
Right.
And some people say that they are taking steps to do it, but then if you look more, the data center is still emitting, but they're buying credits to offset those emissions, which is not really great. But uh, I also understand the viewpoint because they're running massive data centers and they
Yeah.
cannot, at the flick of a switch, change everything. It's going to take them a lot of time to reach where they are. But like companies like me, like greneIT and small, we are small. Like we've got a base of small customers, so we can quickly make the changes what we want and get to the target where we want. So that's the thing with big companies and small businesses. So that's we are more agile, as you would say.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. When you're a small company, you can move quicker, and it's like, it's like moving the Titanic. But
Yeah,
essentially, it's sad that Amazon, Google, Microsoft don't just, collaborate on this completely and work on those data centers. Because essentially, you can,
yeah,
at a small scale, prove the model and how it needs to
yeah,
work and how it can be done. Um, and then equally, like you say, I agree, buying the offsets just isn't really going to cut it.
yeah, yeah. Like like we do offset energy consumption, not the energy consumption, but the energy which is being used on the data network. So, for example, every website will have like for a month about 2 kgs of emissions across the data network, which
Right.
we offset, but we offset it using social and environmental impact projects. So, which the customer who runs their website with us can choose where they want to invest, and it's free of cost for them.
Okay. So what sort of, as a business, did you specifically choose certain sustainable development goals or certain projects based on your values, or how did you pick those projects?
Uh, I picked up projects like from two companies which we partner with,
Mm,
and what I looked into was that there are lots of companies planting trees and doing this, but there's again no certification to it. Like because I lived in a third world country, I know how things work. Like by the time money gets there, it's like 1% of it's left, and the plants are drying and everything. So I picked a couple of companies. There are two of them. One is called Fair Climate Fund, which is
yeah.
equivalent of like fair trade, but it's like
Yeah.
fair climate. So they do like everybody knows is planting trees and not enough. So we are investing on like which are a couple of projects like in India and Africa where people from the villages go into the forest and get wood to make food,
Yeah.
but but those stoves are not very efficient. So what this company is doing, they're providing them stoves which are 50% more efficient, so they can use half the wood they've been using. Obviously, we are not making it 0% CO2 neutral, but we are making some efforts towards it.
Yeah.
And it's better that you help people in the villages with that thing. So
I mean, let's be honest. Those people in villages are creating next to nothing in terms of emissions.
yes,
We know that there's a massive divide between,
yes,
you
yeah,
living in Sweden, me living in
yeah,
England, and the amount of emissions when we add everything up. So,
yeah.
yeah, I totally support that.
Yes. So again, keeping that in mind, most of our projects are run in the south. So in South America, in Africa, in Asia. So there are a couple of projects in South America where it's more like agroforestry.
Yeah,
So helping people run their business through the resources of the forest. And there's a couple of projects where we are helping afforestation of the rainforest, which has been
amazing.
cut.
Yeah.
So that's like customers can choose where they want to invest in. So it does an extra charge. And then what I also wanted to do was that there's a latest technology called CO2 sequestration. So we sequester the CO2 from the environment and store it. So there's a company called Climeworks who does that.
Right.
So what we do is that from every invoice of the customer, we take 5% and give it into this project. So there's
Yeah.
lots going on where like we are not creating this emission, but we are overcompensating for what's happening. So
Yes. So essentially, what some people would know is carbon positive. Essentially, as a business,
yeah,
that's what you've aimed to deliver. No, okay.
yeah,
So yeah, and it's always great, isn't it? I think we need a combination of projects, and simply planting trees
no, yeah,
isn't going to cut it. Actually, it's the protection of and
yes,
regeneration of first. And
yeah,
sadly, as you've identified, money trickling down often doesn't get there, and
yes,
quality, etc. And I think there are lots of other ways to support your clients, whether that's re-wetting peatlands or,
no,
agroforestry, things like that,
yeah,
that are more impactful
yes,
than just planting trees. I'm not saying don't plant trees before everyone
yeah,
screams at me.
yeah, yeah,
But it's about getting the most efficiency, isn't it?
yes, yeah, yeah,
And so let's go back to, say, a listener who, like me, I've got a laptop, I've got a phone, and I've got 2 kids and a husband. And what can we do as individuals? I know you're here to support business, but actually, what information would you want to share with families about
okay.
how they could make a better impact?
Yeah, I completely understand your viewpoint and where you're coming from. The same as myself. It's like what I've always said that uh, working in the IT industry, working with laptops and all, like it's always good to have a new device, but there are lots of devices. When you're buying a new one, you can buy a refurbished one,
Yeah,
which is a amazing thing to do because uh, there is like a lot of devices which go into the landfill, like just being thrown away
yeah,
because the Western society is a very consumer. Like we buy, and we want the
right.
latest thing. But like you can have the latest thing. Like there's a very good website. I think a lot of us would know is called Music Magpie. Uh,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
I buy a lot of things from like if I need a phone, I would buy a refurbished one rather
yeah,
than going for a new one. So that's the first step we can do is to cut down our consumption. And if you need a new device, then you can
yeah,
buy a refurbished one. With me, you like I've got a laptop which is maybe 12 years old and is still
yeah.
running because I know how to upgrade it and keep it
Yes,
working. And then we go back to the second thing which is happening is that there are two big companies, Microsoft and Apple. So what's happening is that people are unaware of it. So Microsoft is building things, better things, but at the same time, those better things need more resources,
yeah,
which in turn makes the hardware manufacturers build devices which use more energy and are more
yeah,
expensive.
yeah,
So this is a cycle which keeps going on and on and on. Like if if we go back maybe 15 years back, you could still do all the things which you're doing now on that same old laptop. What we
yeah,
are doing, we are using the browser most of the time, or
yeah,
using word editing. That's what we do most of the time. So it's a cycle which keeps going on and on. So I know it's not easy for a lot of people, but what I've done is that I've switched myself away from Microsoft and big companies. So I use
right.
this platform called Ubuntu, which is open source. It's really available and you can use it on any old laptop but it's not like I'm giving the information just because there might be people who are a little bit tech savvy and who can make it work. So
Right.
like you can download it and you can put it on an old laptop and make it work. So it's all about like reducing the electronical waste what we have.
Actually, I think you touch on something there. As much as, we've got this world of Bitcoin, crypto, IoT, metaverse, some insane technology coming. I find, maybe I'm just old, but I find myself when I have a laptop or a phone, I still only really use it for calling people, emails, social media. I see myself as relatively tech savvy, not your level. I couldn't program a computer. But I guess we just don't, maybe we're only using 20%, a bit like our brains. We're only using such a small percentage.
Yeah.
But it's creating this e-waste and e-energy that's we're just not needing.
Yeah. There's another company called Circular Computing, which is also doing the same thing. And in fact, like I was getting into it to make more computers which are like more energy efficient. Because if you look at the statistics, what I was saying, that there's a server, there's the data network, and there's the end user. Can you guess which segment uses the most energy?
I'm going to say us.
Yeah, the end user.
Yeah.
It's about 50% of the energy is being used by the end user in all of this. So,
and is that simply from just having social media apps and emails and things like that?
Yeah, just from the laptops and tablets and iPads and all those things together. And the thing is that I don't know whether you've noticed or not, like a lot of companies who sell mobile phones, they have this mobile phone with a battery which cannot be changed.
Yes, really annoying.
So that's part of the thing. Like if it's not working, you just trash it and get a new one. Again, like that's one thing. If you're buying a new one, look into it if the battery can be replaced or not.
There has been some shift, hasn't there? There's like the industry's now said that actually when it comes to charging cables, everyone's got to use the same one. I mean, that's just a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's a positive step in the right direction. I mean, luckily, I've always known a guy who can change an iPhone battery. I just take it to him and he does it.
Yeah, there are people, yeah.
Yeah, and there are, and it's worked perfectly fine for another year or two. But again, it's knowing that knowledge. We are, in a way, as consumers, fearful because we think if we touch the phone, it'll, no one will support us if anything goes wrong. And refurbishment often scares people because, like, well, there was obviously something wrong with it, and so I don't want to touch it. There's a lot of negative thoughts, and it's crazy, really.
It is, yeah, because like people think, like I was talking to somebody and say refurbish, oh, that's like somebody used it and broken it and then they fixed it and they're selling it again. Yeah, certain times is there, but certain times you see that people upgrade the phones. So old phones, these companies buy them back, like Music Magpie or something. Obviously, they're making a profit, but then it's for a good reason. Like you can buy them again, and obviously there is I think they give one year warranty on that. But I think the biggest problem is the e-waste, and then the energy which we use to charge the phones, work on the devices. The more devices you have, the more energy you are taking in.
Yeah. It's interesting because I know when I've done like my own family's footprint, I don't ever really remember putting into that calculator how many laptops did your family own? How many phones did your family own? So I guess it's actually, I mean, I've always calculated it on what I know and then added another 20% and gone, that's probably maybe about right. I invest in an amazing project in Kenya with Wildlife Works. But yeah, it's made me now realise I'm probably missing a big chunk of emissions that I'm not calculating.
Yeah, that's true. Like everybody, like technology is quite, you can say, like a spaghetti. Like there's so many ends and so many twists and things to it. And it's really, really difficult to understand the concept of emissions in it. Like, but if you just take it like every website you're opening is equal to X amount of energy, that helps it out. Like,
Yeah. And so for people who come and use greneIT, obviously there's a real stigma doing anything sustainable, anything, impactful or regenerative. Oh, it's going to cost me a fortune, blah, blah, blah. Are most of your clients finding that when they shift, there isn't an increase to their bills? Or is there a price premium for this 100% renewable via Finland, and then there's these projects, and that's what they're willing to invest in as part of their commitments?
the thing is that there is a price increase comparatively. So, for example, like, I'll put it straightforward because that's what it is. Like, the cheapest one is, I think you've heard of GoDaddy, hosting,
Yeah,
like $2 something, and we don't have that specification of plan. We have higher than that, but for us, the smallest plan starts at 30 euros. So
yeah,
that's a massive difference. But like, in today's world, 30 euros is not a big thing. But what you can get from the 30 euros, you need to see, like, you are investing in impact projects, your website and your whole web application stack is CO2 neutral, and it's
yeah,
overcompensated. Plus, what happens in GoDaddy is that, so they've got one server. In one server, they put a lot of website, which is, think of an overloaded lorry.
yeah,
So that's emitting more smoke. So it's oversubscribed. But at greneIT, what we do, we have something called microservers. So
yeah.
every customer gets their own chunk of microserver, which 100% resources are theirs. So what happens is their website runs much faster.
Going to say, so when you're loading up a page and you're
Yeah,
interacting with the website, it's very,
yeah,
very quick.
yeah. And then technologically, we use another system which is called Content Delivery Network, CDN. That
Right?
helps in example, because the all servers are located in Finland. Suppose your client is in Australia. So it's a long way for the data to travel from Finland to Australia, and that
Yeah.
will take up a lot of energy. So what does CDN do is that there will be a CDN point, for example, in Sydney, which will store
Right.
a copy of the data. So if anybody from Australia accesses it, it won't fetch the data from Finland, it will fetch the data from Sydney. So then we are reducing the emissions over the network there also.
Brilliant.
So
Yeah, because that makes sense.
everything,
Why would you why
yeah,
would you do it from Australia if it's going to go all the way to Finland? Okay.
yeah. So that's what we use. It's called CDN. So, like, there are a lot of small benefits which technologically add up to everything what you're paying. Like, and then you look at the big picture and you think, oh, 30 euros is very less. And if you're getting all those things,
Yeah,
but it's
and
just,
actually, I think if you're a company, IT is a business function,
yeah,
but it's a blooming big one when it comes to emissions. So I
yes,
think if you can round that up and then be able to talk about that through your transparency, through your reporting, share
yeah,
hopefully outputs through the projects that are working
yeah,
that they're working
yeah,
with, then yeah, I think it's a huge step forward.
yeah, yeah. We, like, all this thing is there, but at the moment we are still progressing and making changes, and all these things is what I'm telling is very manual, like the calculations. But we work through the system, and we are waiting for the stage when we can be at a place when everything can be automated. But yeah, we are on the path to progression.
Yeah, and listen, hey, I guess this industry, whilst we've been talking about it for 70 odd years, I think as an industry is relatively new. So I think there's more
Yeah,
people like you transitioning out of a career in a certain business function. Yours is IT. Similarly, I was doing other things,
mm,
and combining that expert knowledge
yeah,
and then how we overlay that
yeah,
into impact regeneration. And that is going to take time.
yes, yeah. That's true. It's like if you have a vision and that's what you want to do, you can achieve it. Like, it's it's not impossible.
It's not easy. It's not easy when you
I know,
start
yes,
out
not.
on
Yeah,
on your own and you've got a small team,
yeah,
and
yeah.
sadly everything comes down to time and money. Let's be honest. One of
Yes,
those two things is a massive lever. But just tell me, as we kind of wrap this up, what would be your top advice for businesses about the knowledge that they should open their eyes to and know, and what they can do about it? And then the same for just your everyday person who might be listening to this, what they can do at home. So essentially, what do they need to know and be aware of? And what can they do to make a change?
okay. So for businesses, my advice is that be aware, know where the data is run from, like where the web application is run from, where their laptops and devices are coming from, because they can make a big difference, both in terms of the cloud interface as well as the hardware thing. Because when they know, like, they're using this data center and it's got this level of energy mix and whatever, then they can take some actions towards that. And same with the hardware thing. If they can find a supplier who can sell them, who can give them refurbished devices,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also a method where they can calculate the emissions of the devices on premises. There are a lot of calculators online and where they can offset. So the
Right,
third thing for them is to go on there and start compensating.
right.
But my advice is before you compensate, stop polluting. So first stop polluting. If you cannot, then compensate. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess that's critical then for businesses listening to this, is really, where do your laptops come from? Where's your data servers? How many websites have you got? What size and
yeah,
scale? So for anyone who's head of IT, chief technology officers, things like that, it's just know where you are today, I guess. Find
yeah,
out the scale of those emissions. Don't be shy to dig deep and
yeah,
look at the supply chain.
yeah.
Um, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
And I guess
There's,
then, I suppose the same for us.
yeah, for the same for the individuals also, but I want to go back one more step back to the businesses, was that sorry, about the about the ethics. Like, there's a lot of talk about data privacy and
Yes.
own your own data. Most of the businesses won't be aware, like, what rights they have over the data. If it's in a data center run by AWS or a big company, and what platform for collaboration they're using, whether the data is easy accessible to it. Because greneIT, that's another thing we work in. Our tagline is sustainable and ethical IT service provider. So that's where the ethics come into. We make sure that the data privacy and data rights are for the user, and that's why we use systems which are not owned by big corporations. So
So,
that's
sorry, because I think this is a really important point. So tell me the difference. If I'm somebody using big corporations versus using a more ethical or a system that doesn't follow those rules, what benefits do I get from that?
so we use a platform called Nextcloud. I don't know, most of you heard. It's a similar tool to G Suite from Google
Yeah.
or Microsoft Office 365.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Nextcloud, what you can do is that you can run it on your own server, which will be sustainable and CO2 neutral. And you know where your data is held. You have access to your data. You have access to the whole server.
Right.
But with Microsoft 365 or Google Suite, they won't give you the access to the server.
Right.
So you don't know where your data is located in the world even.
Okay. Yeah.
So with this, we coming back to ethics, that's the platform we use. We use all open source platforms
Yeah.
which are not tied into global corporations, because, the most of the attacks happen to big corporations in the world of cyber attacks.
Cool.
It's,
I guess the word open source for people would make them think, oh no, open source, is my data at risk? I know that sounds stupid, but people would.
Open source is this, what do you call the word for the system we use, means that open source doesn't mean that your data is open. Open source means that the software you're being used, it's open for developers to take a copy of it, make changes, and share it to the world back again. So it's like more like living in a community. You help each other, you build resources, and you share with each other. So that's the open source in world of technology.
No, and thank you for clarifying that, because for some people it would be like, oh my God, I don't want to know my data. It's bad enough we don't know where our data is. I feel like the horse has bolted now for me in terms of who knows what on me. But thank you for clarifying that.
Going back to the what individuals can do about being sustainable and using less electronics, the same thing goes back again, like reduce electronic waste wherever they can. And then just be aware of what services they're using. Okay, think of, before signing up to anything, think, do I really need it?
Yeah.
Like, if I don't need it, then you'll be reducing the emissions for that service being used. Like, if you don't want to use service XYZ, then you won't be adding another user to the XYZ, and you'll reduce those emissions.
Yeah. And I guess that one's going to be a really tough one, as most clients and products and services move online, move to apps. I mean, even now, you can't go into McDonald's and get served face to face. And, there's so many moving to automation. I think that's going to be a very difficult challenge for consumers and most people and most teenagers aren't going to care where their TikTok or, Snapchat.
I haven't calculated, but obviously, like, people download apps on their phone.
Yeah.
Because there's data transfer depending on the size of the app, there's emissions on that. That's a big thing which individuals can work on, like remove apps from the phone which are not being used.
Right.
And then use a lot of time airplane mode because what happens, we don't know, but our phones transfer data when we are even not using them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's another topic I can go into, but we don't have time, but some other time.
Okay, but that's good. Reducing e-waste. If you're not using it, get rid of it. Airplane mode, and just be conscious, I guess, about websites, emails, and we're all storing things in the cloud automatically as well. I know my iPhone updates all my photos to the cloud, and that's obviously storage, which is taking up energy.
Yeah, there's a thing about how many times we charge a phone. It's equivalent to how many times we boil a kettle for a cup of tea.
Really?
So if we have these things in mind, okay, I'm charging my phone, it's not doing any harm to the world. It is doing harm, but it's not visible.
And most of us leave our phones on charge overnight, right? So not only are we overcharging it, but we're overusing the phone. The battery gets shortened life, so all of those things don't help, do they? But equally, you and I, politely at our age, will remember phones that would last 7 days without having to charge. So bring back those days.
The old Nokias.
I think I've still got one somewhere. I literally do. I think I've still got one somewhere. I think I'll keep it now as a archaic momentum of how old I am. But listen, Robin, thank you so much. I think it's really important just to bring it right back down to basic knowledge and awareness. There's no excuse now to say that I don't get it or I don't understand, certainly from a business point of view. There are people like you out there who can help people. So if there are any businesses listening to this podcast, please get in touch with Robin, and go straight to the greneIT website and at least have a conversation with Robin and his team about what they can deliver, what savings it can make for you, what positive impacts through the projects. or at least get your ducks in a row, at least know where you are and find out. And I think that's a really important message from you today, Robin.
Yeah, I think that's the most important. Just be aware, just be aware and know what's going on behind the scene, like where your data is, what energy, and the whole supply chain, everything. It helps a lot just to knowing. And the
great news is, guys, at the end of the day, there are people like Robin out there who can do this for you, and essentially there is a solution to the problem. So that's a really positive impact and a positive change. So Robin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really enjoyed it, and just like challenging my own thoughts about my usage at home and my business as well. So thank you so much, Robin.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Rona, and thanks for inviting me to this podcast. Thank you so much. Have a great
You're very welcome. Have an awesome day. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rona Morel podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.